Okay.
We're live and in charge. We rocking and rolling on the YouTube.
Let's make it happen.
What is going on, everybody? Rocking and rolling on this little thing called YouTube, 3 and Out Podcast. Me, John Middle, on the volume. Check. And yeah, let's rock and roll, baby. How do you get a little agua? Okay. I wanted to start with the Miami, Houston, Deshaun Watson situation, which kind of took over the internet on Wednesday. I think it happened. Yeah, Wednesday afternoon. Stories were breaking left and right that basically a trade was imminent and something was going down, and it looked like Deshaun Watson was headed to the Miami Dolphins in I would say the foreseeable future. I think we have a couple weeks till the trade deadline. But let's just put a couple things on the table right now. First and foremost, some things in life you know right away. Listen, every human being screws up. In the business world, in relationships, we have all made mistakes. Nobody, the best in the world at whatever you do, are not perfect. Steve Jobs made mistakes. Elon Musk makes mistakes. Belichick makes mistakes. So them making a mistake on Tua for Herbert, like every general manager has whiffed. I mean, it happens. The problem is that's a big whiff. And they had basically built the entire season for their ability to get a quarterback. And then they, even landing at 5, we all thought they did a good job, tank for Tua. They just picked the wrong guy. You knew it right away. And sometimes in life, you know it right away. The Warriors did it with James Wiseman. They passed on LaMelo Ball. And I watched LaMelo Ball on Wednesday night, opening night for his team in the NBA. He had 31, 7, and 8. Kid's a superstar. James Wiseman is not even in the top 10 of their rotation with the Warriors. Now, granted, he's hurt, but LaMelo's an all-star. The chances that James Wiseman will be are slim to none. Justin Herbert is a superstar. Tua, average at best. They whiffed. And when you whiff at tackle or wide receiver or linebacker, whatever, it happens, you pivot. When you miss at quarterback, especially drafting that high, it sets your franchise back years. It is a devastating mistake for the general manager and the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. But here's the problem. And I don't blame the owner, who clearly has his hands now involved in everything, for being mad and being kind of desperate. But I think we would all agree that desperation can create mistakes, right? Any lesson when you're young, making like big purchases, whether it's cars, whether it's your first home, whatever it is. And the bigger you get, maybe it's acquiring business, hiring employees. You never want to do things out of desperation. Desperation can lead to mistakes. We have all made deals out of desperation, and it cost us money. No human, like mistakes in the draft, can avoid that. And I think right now the Dolphins are operating out of desperation. Of course they are. They're 1-5. They're a joke. They just lost to the Jags in London. We're all making fun of them. They have Tua instead of Herbert. Like, they should be desperate. But I don't think going down the road of trading for a quarterback that we have no clue who is going to be absolved from all these allegations with the massage therapist is a risk you want to take. Because I think if things were just going okay, you would just take a deep breath and go, let's see at the end of the season. Even if you already know, and I think it's fair to say, they already know Tua ain't the guy. Like sometimes you just know right away with players. Sometimes it takes players a couple years to figure it out. But I think it's pretty clear that Tua is never going to be what the top guys like. We have so many examples right now in the NFL of what top guys look like at young ages, whether it's Lamar, whether it's Herbert, whether it's Mahomes, whether it's Josh Allen, all these guys. Like it's clear. It is clear what it looks like. You do not need to be Parcells or Bill Walsh to see it. My mother can watch the Monday Night Football and go, holy moly, Josh Allen from Fireball? That's what it's supposed to look like. And Miami plays in that division, so they see him. And they go, yeah, our guy is never going to sniff that guy. And to me, the number one question I think you have to ask is, well, what's the price we have to pay for Deshaun Watson? Because while I agree, the desperation, the conviction of doing this deal, they can't feel great about. But if I had to pay like a second-round pick, it would be worth the risk where if he got in trouble and we could never use him, we took a flyer. And if he gets absolved and he becomes our quarterback, we paid 10 cents on the dollar. But if I have to pay somewhat normal prices, a couple ones, a couple twos, and a player, hell, 3 1s and a 2, and it doesn't get figured out and he stays in trouble and he's never able to play for me, you think Tua set back their franchise would be ruined for the foreseeable future. They would be screwed. So to me, the price on the acquisition is very important to know. And obviously, we don't know what that is. If they can get him for 20 cents on the dollar, listen, I understand that's not a desperate move. That's just, hey, we are getting a distressed asset that we think we can get back. And if everything goes away, he's our starting quarterback, we're in good shape. But if I got to pay, which let's face it, typically when you buy a sweet quarterback, and it's not very often they become available. Hell, Kirk Cousins became a free agent, several years ago, and it cost basically $90 million in guaranteed money. We saw if you wanted Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, it was going to take like 4 1s. So you have to pay 150 cents on the dollar, right? Think how much more you have to pay to acquire a guy like Watson normally. So if I can get him cheap, the profit is made in the price you pay for it, not what you sell something for. So if they get it cheap, I wouldn't crush them. But I think it's fair to say they would not get him cheap. They would have to, at minimum, give like 2 1s and 2 2s for something they just do not know. And they're only even thinking about doing that is because they are so desperate. And then 2, what happens if they do get him? And even if they, pay a normal price, like 2 1s and a 2, which if he was never got in trouble, you would say that's a steal. But then legal action happens and the league has to get involved, which they haven't yet, and he never plays it down for you. Like those guys' careers, Chris Greer, Brian Flores, would be over. You are putting your careers on the line doing this. For 2 guys last year that we went, that guy's a good GM and that guy's a really good coach. And now we're calling them both the village idiots. Well, maybe they weren't quite as good as we thought, but they're probably not as bad as everyone's shitting on them now. So do you want to put your career on the line by doing this? And that's what I would imagine they're thinking about long and hard. But an element that we don't talk about enough is that we crush the GM, we crush the owner, the head coach. A move like this would never happen without not even just the blessing, but really the push from the owner. And I think a lot of times, part of owning an NFL franchise, what's best about it is the money. It's an unlimited amount of money that whether you even don't turn a profit with your home stadium, with your franchise, you're guaranteed to turn a profit because of the media rights deals. And let's face it, everyone's turning a profit with their stadiums. So it's an absolute cash cow. It's one of the best businesses right now in America. So the owners, they not only make money, but they get away with let's say they trade for Watson the next week. Everyone would be like, oh, Chris Greer, Brian Flores. What if it was all the owner? Well, those 2 guys would never admit that the owner forced them to do that, right? But it's clear like last year when Tua came in kind of out of nowhere. Remember after Ryan Fitzpatrick played the 49ers and lit him up like a Christmas tree? He looked like Dan Marino 2.0. They went on a bye and the next week Tua starting. Well, it was obvious that the owner pressured them into doing it. Brian Flores can say whatever he wants. We've all been watching sports long enough to know, yeah, this is a little fishy. And of course he did. Herbert was taking the league by storm. Little Tua, let's see what this guy has. We have a good team. And then it failed. And Flores, I'll give him some credit, kept yanking him out of the games. and they actually won a game because of it against the Raiders and almost came back against Denver. I actually watched a lot of Miami Dolphins football last year for some reason. But I think the owner is playing a huge role in this. And there's a reason that the Dolphins not only just stay average, but for the most part are always irrelevant. It might be because of Stephen Ross. He might just be a terrible owner. Now, I'm not necessarily putting the Tua pick on him because ultimately you can say, listen, every single human would have taken Tua over Herbert. And that's true. Like media people, a lot of people were talking about that. But that is, I say this all the time. It doesn't matter what everyone thinks. It was Greer and Flores' job to get it right. And they got it wrong. And if I'm Telesco, and it's kind of been widely reported, I mean, he's boys with Coward and Gottlieb, that they would have taken Tua as well. If I was him, and I'm not a religious guy, I would say a prayer every single day. Thank you, Lord, for throwing this in my lap. Because them taking Tua led me to Herbert. And ultimately, a doctor really led Herbert to getting on the field, and it changed the Chargers' career. Another quarterback story that kind of took the offseason by storm was Aaron Rodgers. He was going to force a trade. He was going to go to the Broncos, and they were going to trade a bunch of picks, and he was going to come back west, and he was going to be closer to his girlfriend, fiance, who knows what she is, in Los Angeles. And it was like, I just kept saying, I understand emotions are high. They had a rough NFC Championship loss. Like Aaron had to be thinking, I'm going to win the Super Bowl. And I don't blame him. I picked him to win the Super Bowl last year. Once the playoffs started, I'm like, this is Green Bay's Super Bowl to lose. And then he has a devastating loss against Tom freaking Brady at Lambeau Field. It just, emotions were high. And I really think, I'm not saying that he made up the Gutekunst beef, but I think that a lot got created in his head over some pretty innocuous moves of practice squad type players. And it just got a little weird. And clearly he pressured the Packers, and they relented and really capitulated to a lot of his demands. They brought in Randall Cobb. They just feel like they've done a good job, and I will give Brian Gutekunst a lot of credit. It feels like the Packers have gone above and beyond to just make him feel better. And you watch Aaron Rodgers last week in Chicago screaming, "I still own you," which is just an all-time NFL moment. That was, just someone I don't care about really either team. That was fun. It made us all laugh, and it was true. And then watching him these last couple weeks with Pat McAfee, it just looks like he's having a good time. It looks like everything's going well. And I think sometimes when emotions are high, it's why a lot of coaches talk about, whether they're going to, retire. Players often talk about whether they're contemplating retiring. You don't make that decision right after the last game, right? You take a step back, you take a deep breath, you have a couple cocktails, you take a week to think about it. You don't want to make decisions when your emotions are the highest, right? You don't probably want to get a divorce in the middle of a fight when you're screaming at each other. Now, a week later, you've both had some time to think. Maybe you realize, listen, we're not right for each other. Let's go our separate ways, right? But usually that's it takes a lot of time to build up to that. And I think Aaron Rodgers, I feel like he pulled some of his excuses out of his you-know-what. But you watch him this year, like, it's going pretty well. The Packers are in absolute cruise control. They're 5-1. I don't know if he's going to win the MVP, but he's having another great season. Statistically, he's going to throw 40 to 45 touchdowns, probably 7-8 picks, and they're going to compete to be the number 1 seed. The Green Bay Packers are easily a top 7-8 brand in sports in America. There's not really that many better places to play NFL quarterback in America, right? You could say the Cowboys are a little more famous, but the Packers quarterbacks, Favre and Rodgers, have been bigger than any Cowboy quarterback. Tom Brady kind of created the Patriots. You could argue it's the best quarterback job in America, the Green Bay Packers. Iconic brand. He's an iconic player. But most importantly, his team is really good. Like, they are really, now they got some flaws or whatever, but when you go 14, 15 wins, last year they went 13-3, the year before they go 13-3, it doesn't get any better than that. So I know Colin has thrown out, maybe he's looking at Pittsburgh. Obviously, Denver's going to keep circling the wagons. How are either of these situations better than the situation he's at right now? And I think we all would agree that they will do whatever it takes to extend Devontae Adams this offseason, who, for my money, is the best wide receiver in the league. So he has a superstar wide receiver. He has multiple running backs. Bakhtiari's coming back this week. His offensive line, say what you want about Gutekunst, that guy can find random offensive line, let alone the starting players that they already have, and a lot of them are coming back. I think the center might be out this week, but Aaron Rodgers' situation is pretty good. And they did hit a little adversity week 1. And even Rodgers was like, everyone take a deep breath. He didn't quite go as far as the relax, but he said, everyone take a deep breath. Rattle off 5 straight wins. I mean, now they're playing the football team this week. They're going to be 6-1. I mean, they have a very, very good shot to be the number 1 seed for the second year in a row and have the NFC go through Lambeau Field. So I get a lot of DMs, and this is why I thought about this. Like, what do you think about Aaron Rodgers? Like, I look pretty happy to me. Sometimes you get into a bad fight, and, it felt a little more one-sided on Rodgers' side. But listen, we all have our own truths. And then you realize a week later, a month later, 6 months later, a year later, I got it pretty good. And he's got it pretty damn good. And so my take is going to be consistently till I hear otherwise from 12 that I think he's going to be on the Packers for the foreseeable future. I think they figured this out. I think the head coach and him get along very well. Clearly, offensively, they're on the same page. He gets to do the best of both worlds. He gets to mesh the Shanahan system, which works in terms of running the ball, yet they still let him do some of his in the shotgun 4 or 5 wide stuff you don't see, from, Shanahan type coaches. I guess McVay's doing a little more because he has Stafford. And his offense just rolls. So my take on Rodgers and the Packers, where it still feels like it's one of those things lingering, like I don't see a breakup imminent. Another big story, and I just think the way society has turned that, and I'm not some like media hater. Technically, I'm in the space, though. I don't really consider, I'm definitely not a journalist. I did not go to journalism school. I do not care. Like, I'm an opinion guy. I sell my words. I care about entertainment and money. That's all this is. There is zero journalistic integrity involved. Though, I have a lot of respect. I know how hard it is to be a beat writer. I know I wrote for The Athletic for a couple years. I'm close with all the Bay Area guys that do it. I had a column back in the day at Cal Poly, Johnny in the Box. So I do respect the hell out of the profession. I know how hard it is. But, like, they get a lot of pressure now from the powers that be to be very salacious. And I think everything in terms of the media has just become so salacious. And that, listen, it's the consumer. That's what we like. When we see a salacious headline, we are more likely to probably click on that, to consume that, than we are something that's kind of boring. And I saw some stuff this week, which was pretty crazy, that basically people that once Ed Ogeron had officially broken up, even though they're not technically firing him yet, they had a bunch of reports came out that were, just like, God, is this guy a bad guy? Did this guy, what's up with Ed Ogeron? And 2 stories I saw. One was that he hit on a pregnant woman at a gas station. And the other was that he was bringing around his girlfriend's children and letting them practice in drills. The Athletic has had to retract that it was not true that the woman that he hit on, who was actually married to one of the board of directors at LSU, was not pregnant. But when you add in your story that she was pregnant, that is a wowzer moment. And then the other story that came out about LSU was that the girlfriend's children were allowed to practice and participate in LSU practices, which is insane. Like, I've been to enough practices. It's one thing, like, once practice ends, you let some kids on the field. That happens at every level, high school to the pros. But in the middle of practice, that's crazy. Every single player, I saw a ton of players on my Twitter timeline, like, this is completely made up. I've been in this program for 3 or 4 years. I've never seen this. So it's like, the mainstream media is losing so much of our attention's the wrong word, but our trust because of crap like that. Like, you are just destroying a man's character. Did he do a good enough job coaching the football team? Clearly not. LSU has super high standards, and he was not good enough. But when you say that he's hitting on pregnant women and doing some of the things at practice and it's untrue, like, you can retract it. You can, claim, well, I got bad information. The information's already out there. And that is just happening way too much in society. Like, it's pretty crazy. I know a couple people that have worked with Ed O that don't really like him. And so I'm not like some Edo truther here as a person. I've never met him. I've been around him a couple times going to USC practices. When I was a GA at Fresno State, we went to watch some practices. But I don't know the guy at all. So I'm not here to defend his character as like some from a personal connection. But that to me, like, what if that happened to me or you? Like, that's kind of bullshit. And like I said, there's just no, well, we were wrong on that. Like, that's a pretty big thing to be wrong on. And then just the job itself. I didn't know much about this Scott Woodward character, who's the AD. So I did a little Googling. And he'd been at Washington for almost a decade. Then he went to Texas A&M, and now he's been at LSU for a couple of years, which was his alma mater. And if you look at the history of his 4 coaching hires, he hired Steve Sarkisian after the Washington Huskies team went 0-12 one year. It was terrible. And at the time, like, I do give him credit for that. Now, it turned out Sark struggled to win 8 games and is not a very good head coach, and now University of Texas is seeing that. But at the time, that was a good hire. No different than Texas at the time hiring Tom Herman. It made a lot of sense. It did not work out, but it made a ton of sense. So while ultimately the hire didn't work out, like, he was on the right guy. A lot of people were trying to hire Sark back when he did. Then he got a lifeline. When Sark got the job at USC after Lane got fired and then Ed didn't get the job, he hired Chris Peterson, who at the time at Boise State, things were starting to get weird. They had for his first time in his career, had somewhat of a down season. I think they won like 7 or 8 games. And I know people that know him. He's a UC Davis guy. I'm born and raised in Davis. My dad's close with a lot of Davis athletic, type people. And they all kind of run in the same circles. Chris Peterson, Mike Bellotti, Dan Hawkins. There was this crew of Davis guys, Hackett, who's now, I think, with Aaron Rodgers with the Packers. They're all kind of in the same crew, and they all have mutual friends. And Chris Peterson was just kind of tired of it. Like, we're a mid-major. I've been kicking everyone's ass, and you're treating me like this LSU or Alabama. We have one bad season. So he was there to be had. And Woodward got him. So Woodward lost Sark and upgraded. Like, that was an impressive hire. Then Washington made it to the playoffs a couple years later, hit a home run. Then he goes to Texas A&M, and similar to Chris Peterson at Boise, Jimbo was going through some weird stuff at Florida State, right? Obviously, the program was kind of in a weird spot. He was going through a bad divorce. You can Google it. It's kind of a salacious story as well, though I think that one was based on facts. And he landed him. And he got the boosters, and they gave him a ton of money. I think his first contract, they gave him like $75 million. He's now on his second contract for $100 million. Jimbo's made a lot of money at Texas A&M. But so he went back-to-back coaching hires, Chris Peterson and Jimbo Fisher, which were just home runs for both programs, right? Chris probably a little bit more, but Jimbo just beat Alabama. Jimbo's as good as Texas A&M can ever wish to do. And now he goes to LSU. But I look around the landscape, like, there's not really a Chris Peterson or a Jimbo Fisher that's at, a high-level program, that's a high-level coach, that kind of feels in distress, that feels like he can go land. So for the first time, he's going to have to, I guess, Sark a little bit, but let's face it, he's trying to get a national championship level coach. In his mind, he's going to try to do kind of what Miami or what Alabama did when Saban was at Miami, what Ohio State did when they landed Urban Meyer. Get a guy that right away can win national championships. And one name I saw on the kind of the Reddit message board, just on the internet streets, and I've said this for years, that Mike Tomlin would kill it, and I mean dominate in college football. I've always said that about Herm. And look at ASU. They're pretty competitive. He's made them much better by year 3 than they were for like the last decade. Like, Herm Edwards is working in college football. That can't be disputed. And Mike Tomlin is an infinitely better coach. You just look at their 2 NFL resumes than Herm Edwards. Now, is Mike Tomlin going to leave the Pittsburgh Steelers for LSU? Probably not. But if you can convince him, like, bro, your quarterback situation is a mess, maybe he's just time for a change. Now, Mike Tomlin would immediately get hired in the NFL. So I don't know if he'd ever be interested in the recruiting aspect, but I've heard him on enough podcasts and heard him give enough like off-season interviews. I do think he really values influencing humans' lives. And if any guy was going to make the transition, I could see Woodward going and just trying to land him. Now, I think it's a Hail Mary, but if you are Scott Woodward, you better throw some Hail Marys. You better be okay with people saying no, Because like James Franklin, you just go hire James Franklin or a Luke Fickell or just all these, the same names that are out there. It is no guarantee that he's going to be as good as Ed Ogeron, let alone going to survive more than 3 years. So to me, I'm taking an absolute swing for the fence and making people say no. Same with Urban Meyer. Now, I don't know, if he would be in the Urban Meyer business. Urban's got some weird shit going on. Who knows? But like those are the type names I would go after before I ever went for the smaller names. Even Lane Kiffin, like to me, he's not on their level, right? James Franklin is not on these guys' level. So I would expect him to go fishing in the deep end of the pool. And it's when you're LSU and you can pay $8, $9, $10 million, you're in the SEC, which is basically the NFL now. Like to me, the LSU and USC job, they're not even comparable. The Pac-12, and listen, born and raised on the West Coast. I've lived 34 and a half years of my life in California. I'm a Pac-12 homer. We don't hold a candle to the SEC. Interest, finances, NFL prospects, the whole thing. It is so much bigger, and it pains me to say. It's why I claim to be an SEC guy. The SEC interests me much more now than the Pac-12, and that's sad. And so does it with a lot of these kids. It's why so many of them go to school there. Najee Harris, 5 minutes away. Bryce Young, LA guy. I mean, they're just getting all of our best players, as they should. I would go there too if I had the options. So I'm very, very fascinated what LSU is going to do. But I'll promise you, there are going to be some enormous names linked with this program. Now, is it going to happen? Who knows? Do they probably end up with a James Franklin type? Probably. But I would expect this guy, given the resources, given the power of his program, given the power of his conference, to go big game hunting. Let's just fly around the NFL really quick. This is a pretty terrible weekend. Ton of buys, a lot of bad games, a lot of huge spreads. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals they play the Texans. They're going to be 7-0. When you go 7-0 in a 17-game season, I mean, if they go 4-6 the rest of the year, they would be, I mean, they're going to make the playoffs this year. I mean, that would be 11-6. That'd be a playoff lock. I mean, they might not win the division, but and more than likely, they're not going to go 4-6. That would probably be a Kyler Murray injury. Even if they went 5-5, that would be 12-5. I mean, the Cardinals going 6-0, then having the Texans are just in fantastic shape. I gotta eat crow on that. I was wrong. Chiefs Titans, Mahomes, their offense has been really good, and they've turned the ball over at a really high rate. Mahomes has thrown a ton of picks. Clyde had those, I think, was it 3 games in a row? It was definitely 2 where he had the fumbles. So if they could just cut the turnovers a little bit, that offense is just really, really explosive. And listen, anytime Derrick Henry's taking the field, I'm watching. This guy, we all know he's getting the ball. And wouldn't we all be stunned if he doesn't have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns? As someone who plays daily fantasy, I always overthink it. I'm like, oh, this will be the game that Henry has 30 yards. And then he has 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's just like clockwork. He's really on one of the most remarkable 3-year stretches in NFL history. The Bengals and the Ravens. Are the Bengals just good? I mean, I don't think they're going to win this game, but I definitely wouldn't say they don't have a shot to win this game. Jamar Chase went from not catching anything in August to Marlon Humphrey. I think his quote was something like this week, like he's taking the league by storm. This guy's dominating. Jamar Chase is elite. Burrow's a stud. I mean, that's just an awesome 1-2 combination. Joe Mixon's really good. That's a pretty good big 3. Burrow, Mixon, and Jamar Chase. Now, again, I do not think they're going to win this game, but if they did, would we have to take the Bengals as like a legitimate, I don't want to say AFC contender, but just a team that's going to make serious noise that could win a playoff game? No human, even Bengals fans, would have said that in middle of August, but things change fast. I mean, when you win games and when you have explosive offensive players and a really good quarterback, I think we got to take it seriously. Jamar Chase versus Marlon Humphrey. Sign me up for that matchup. How about the Vegas Raiders? They have a chance to be 5-2. I mean, obviously Gruden's gone, but if you're 5-2, they'd be in pretty good shape. Like, how are they not going to be an AFC wild card? Now, the Eagles, who are a very weird team, who have not looked good for several weeks, and a big part of that has been their quarterback play has been atrocious. Jalen has not played well. He's put up a lot of hollow stats late in games when they've had big leads. They match up pretty good against the Raiders. The Raiders' offensive line, beside their left tackle, is not very good. Leatherwood, the guy they drafted number 17 overall, is now a guard. The Eagles have fantastic defensive linemen. Hargraves is an all-pro level player right now. Fletcher Cox probably is not as good as he was a couple years ago, but is still really good. I don't know how they're going to block these guys. And when Derek gets pressured, it doesn't go that well. Now, I'd have a hard time, picking the Eagles in this game, and I think the Raiders win. But you watch. I bet this game is a little closer than you think, unless Jalen is just atrocious. Now, the Raiders defense, they don't exactly have Deion Sanders and Ed Reed walking through that door in their secondary. So I would imagine Jalen would be a little bit better this week. Also cool, there are so many Alabama players right now. You cannot turn on an NFL game and not see multiple Alabama guys like playing well. I mean, just think about in this game. You're going to have Josh Jacobs. You're going to have Henry Ruggs. You're going to have Devontae Smith. You're going to have Landon Dickerson. Kenyon Drake, who's a little bit older than those guys, but he's in this game. I mean, they're just blue chippers from Alabama all over the league kicking ass. Forever, like the first half of Saban's run, it was always like, he can't, there's no, beside running back, and even they're kind of questionable, it's just offensive linemen and defensive players. Well, now it's wide receivers, it's running backs, it's, hell, even quarterbacks, even though Tua is a little, not that good, he still starts. And last but not least, Niners Colts. Kind of sucks. I mean, we got the one game of Trey Lance, and now he's hurt. It's weird because no one saw him get hurt. I don't know when he got hurt, and then they claimed after the game he had a sprained knee, even though he said post the Arizona game, I feel fine. Then he doesn't practice all week during the bye week, and then they give him the weekend off, but he's at the Giants game on Thursday. Now he's missed practice all week. So we're going to get the Jimmy Garoppolo experience, which has not gone well. The Colts, who are getting the best Carson Wentz version we've seen, in years. I don't know. I mean, are the Niners really going to lose their first 3 home games of 2021? If they do, like people around here are down on Kyle Shanahan. This is a big game for Kyle Shanahan just to get some of his mojo back. This guy was considered universally, but definitely locally, as like boy wonder. And right now, people are kind of calling him like village idiot. Like, what are you doing? Why can't you score any points? So I expect the Niners to win, though I do not feel very good about it. Have a great day, everyone. Adios. Godspeed. May the peace be with you.